Wow, okay. Hi, Silvia.
Hi, good
Hi.
morning to everyone.
Yeah, we're not good at technology. We talk about scientific knowledge, but we're not really good about it. But anyway, hi, Silvia. How is it going? So can you say welcoming, say, and yeah.
Of course. Now, first of all, I would like to apologize because I can't physically be in Helsinki this morning. Actually, I was in Helsinki until 4 hours ago. I left at nearly 7 o'clock in the morning, but for urgent family matters, I need to be back to my hometown, which is Bologna in Italy. So again, apologize. And at the same time, I'm really happy because the technology can help me to connect and be with you without really being with you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think the panel session we are going to have, it's going to be really inspiring. There will be many very interesting presentations. So from my side, welcome to everyone. A few words about myself. My name is Silvia Gaiani, and I'm a senior researcher at Ruralia Institute, which is part of the University of Helsinki. And what I'm doing at Ruralia Institute is leading a long-term research on food innovation and entrepreneurship in Finland, with a specific focus on South Ostrobothnia. And by background, I'm an agricultural economist, and before joining Ruralia, I've been mostly working for UN agencies, so FAO in Rome and WMO in Geneva. And again, welcome, and it's a pleasure to see you all.
Thank you, Silvia. And we have a change of lineup. So now the first presentation would be virtual online. It's from Gwen from Japan Research Institute for Agricultural Sciences. The presentation title is Do Online Communities of Practice Complement or Substitute the Conventional Extension Services? So it's evidence from the Indonesian shrimp farmers' participation in a Facebook group. So hi, Lee, can you hear us? And can you share some slides?
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lee from Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences. Today, I'd like to introduce one of my papers co-authored with Ayu Pratiwi, Parika, Ayasuzuki, and Takashi Kurosaki. So let me briefly introduce about this paper. The purpose of this paper is to test my research questions about online community of practice can replace or substitute conventional extension services, such as extension services by extension workers or farmer-to-farmer extension services. Okay. So let me talk about the conventional extension services. First one, extension agents. So the concept of extension services by extension agents is that extension agents educate farmers and disseminate agricultural practices and knowledge and technologies. However, so many smallholder farmers in developing countries are unable to benefit from extension services because of due to shortage of extension agents. So in Indonesia, so the ratio of extension agents to farmers is only 1 to 1,000. So it's very difficult to meet extension agents to ask about agricultural issues. So as an alternative way, since 1980s, the farmer-to-farmer extension started to be attracted. So the concept of farmer-to-farmer extension services is that extension agents educate only selected farmers called model farmers, and the model farmers, they educate, they train, or disseminate information to their peer farmers or neighboring farmers like this. The farmer-to-farmer extension service is very ideal extension services, but this kind of farmer-to-farmer extension service also has some constraints called social network constraints. I mean, if a farmer, they have no connection with the farmer who have information, they cannot get information from the farmers. Also, if a farmer, the farmer know a farmer who have information, but the farmer and the who have information, so the farmer don't have any strong relationship. The farmer could not disseminate information to their neighboring farmers because some delivery information is timely and costly. So also if information becomes more complicated, so many farmers, they do not willing to share their information to other farmers. So that's one of the constraints of farmer-to-farmer extension services. Let me talk about online communities of practice. Since 2000s, online community of practice is we can easily see. So like some Facebook groups or some online communities we can see. So this kind of online community of practice, kind of non-exclusive, especially public groups. So anyone can be member of online communities. Also non-rivalries. I mean, they can get information without any competition. Also, online community of practice is digital goods. So the marginal cost of producing digital goods is typically very low, often close to zero, like Netflix. So Netflix registered their new movie, so there are no additional charge. How many people watch the movie. Also, maybe online community of practice is anti-rival goods. So it means that if as the member increase, the quality of information improve. So to sum up, online community of practice, so non-excludable and non-rivalous, unlike farmer-to-farmer extension services and extension agents. So I mean, online community is like a public goods. So given these characteristics, online community of practice could replace or complement conventional extension services such as extension agents and farmer-to-farmer extension services. So we tested our research questions 1 to 3. So the association between the user of conventional extension services and the user of online community of practice to answer our research questions. But if the farmer-to-farmer extension users, if they use online community of practice at the same time, but maybe online community of practice could replace or complement the farmer-to-farmer extension services, but we don't know the direction, which one is complement or conventional, complement or replace. So to check the direction, so we test this research question. So if farmers, the online community of practice as the most reliable information source, maybe the farmer-to-farmer extension services, so complement online community of practice. Also, we tested this research question about the information sharing and inquiry in online community of practice. So to test our research question, to answer our research questions, we collected data from 1,574 shrimp farmers in Indonesia. So among 1,574 shrimp farmers, the 243 is a member of a Facebook group called the KUVI. So KUVI is the Indonesian Panama shrimp community. they have 95,000 farmers members. I'm sorry, soon. They have 116,000 members. So, yeah, the KUBI is the largest online community of practice in Indonesia, and the member of KUBIs, they actively share this kind of information, like using some various features offered by Facebook, such as the photos and videos and messages. Also, so the member of KUBI, if they have some questions, they actively ask other members. So instantly, many farmers, they answered the questions. Also, using the data collected from Indonesia, so we created this kind of map. This map indicates that many KUBI members, their farm located the region where the shrimp farm is mainly occurred in Indonesia. Also, our figure indicates that the majority access the KUBI more than once a week, but majority, most people, they never share or never ask to other KUBI members. So it means that most KUBI members, they just browse KUBI to get some information what they needed. Also, our figure indicates that the sharing and inquiries related to price information were the highest among all categories. Contrary to our expectations, the shrimp industry disease is very severe problem. So we expected most farmers, they use KUBI to get information to prevent shrimp disease or to treat shrimp disease, but the number of information sharing and inquiry cases regarding shrimp disease was so low. This may be because prevention or treatment method for shrimp disease vary depending on the environmental factors of the region. So you just demand the region-specific information rather than general information. Here's our models to answer our research questions. Y is dependent variable. So dependent variable, when you test research question 1, so it is binary variable. 1 is use KUBI and 0 is otherwise. And when you test the research question 2, whether the KUBI is the most reliable information source or not, this one also binary variable. 1 is trusts KUBI the most among the source of information, and 0 otherwise.
Sorry, you have 1 minute left.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway, so using this kind of models, so I found that those who obtain information from their neighbors or extension workers are more likely to use KUBI. And those who obtain information from farmer-to-farmer extension are less likely to choose KUBI as the most reliable source of information. Based on this finding, so I like to answer to my main research question. Online community of practice may not yet have penetrated farmers in Indonesia and act as a complement to rather than a substitute for conventional extension services, because the farmers seek information not only from online community of practice, but also from their peers due to the variation in the requirements for shrimp farming, which depends on the local ecological condition and climate. So to overcome this kind of some shortcoming of online community of practice, we needed to make the information flow from our real community to online community of practice using the two encourage the farmers some motivation to share information. So at the same time from their real community to Kobe. So thank you very much. That's all from me.
So for this session, we plan to have a question and answer session in the end. But since I understand that Lee, he's in a different time zone, so it's very late afternoon for him, I guess. And I understand, Lee, that you cannot really stay until the end of this session. So in that situation, we might have questions now for Lee's presentation. But for the other presentations, we will have, in the end of this session, a general question and answer session.
Okay, thank you, Lee, for the very interesting presentation. I'm just wondering, my name is Daniel from Aalto University. How reliable is it, like this Facebook group? I mean, if people really follow like the informations or suggestions that is shared in the Facebook group, and then who will take responsibility if something wrong happened? I mean, with agricultural extension, it's very easy, right? Like, okay, this guy told me to do this, and then it doesn't work, and then, well, maybe they will have to take some responsibility or something. So I'm just wondering, the trust the people have in this Facebook group.
So thank you so much for your question, Daniel. So yeah, I'm also, so now I'd like to verify whether we can trust the information from Facebook or not. So to test the questions, we now plan to evaluate the impact of online community of practice on farmers, the productivity or something. So yeah, we are also, so my hypothesis is that Facebook, yeah, so maybe there are some mixed information like noise and collected information. So if farmers, their knowledge level is too low, so it's very difficult to distinguish noise and the correct information, accurate information. So sometimes this kind of online community is very harmful and has negative effect for farmers, the farming. So after evaluating the impact of after the study to evaluate the impact of online community of practice, so we'd like to suggest some new online community of practice platform to solve some the kind of infodeming problems. So.
Okay, are there other questions?
Ellen Huaniemi from Luque. I would like to ask that why don't you have two layers of extension service online? The first one is the official one where you give the prices and the input use. And the second one is the unofficial one where you have Facebook, where farmers discuss how useful and how much they have been using the inputs or the price that did they get the price that recommended by the official extension services. This would actually complement each other online.
Sorry, so your question means, so why didn't I use the input as some dependent variable, or?
No, not I mean that you have two online services. One from
two online service?
Yeah, one from the official extension services. So not like face-to-face extension services, but you have, because you see your inputs and prices, so it's easy to put it online. What are the prices for the shrimps, and then what type of inputs? the prices for the inputs and how much to use. Then on the Facebook is the farmers discussing that how much they use and how much they get paid for the shrimps.
Yes. Thank you very much. So yeah, also farmers using the kind of Facebook community, so they ask other farmers how to prevent the shrimp disease or something. Also depending on temperature, also they ask other farmers how much input they need to use, so they can ask some the kind of things. But unlike some extension agent services, it could be very difficult to learn some new practices through the Facebook communities.
Okay, I think thank you very much. I think that was one of the policy recommendation about the two kinds of channel, official and unofficial ones. And in Facebook, maybe we could use the unofficial ones, and more formal information could be distributed by another more official Facebook. Is that so? Yeah. So thank you very much, Lee. Probably a round of applause for him.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next presenter would be Hannele Heusala from Natural Resources Institute of Finland. It's called Agri-Food Sector, Harmonizing Environmental Sustainability Assessment in the Multi-Actor Platform.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Hannele Heusala and I come from Luke. I come from Sustainability Science and Indicators Group, where we do a lot of different things, but we are almost 20 people doing life cycle assessments there as well. And today I would talk about agri-food sector harmonizing environmental sustainability assessment methods in multi-actor platforms. And this picture shows why we are doing this. I just yesterday evening picked up a few of the labels that came to my mind in the first place that I have seen lately in products in the market, but there are several. There are a lot of different kind of eco labels on climate impacts, on climate neutrality, on compensation, on different things on biodiversity. And we really need harmonization behind the assessment and for the communication. But first of all, to know how to make this sustainability transition, first of all, we need to know what is sustainable. That information is needed for the consumers, for policymakers, for companies, anyone doing decisions on how we produce and what do we consume. So how to measure sustainability? On the product level or organization or service level, life cycle assessment is an established method. It includes the whole production systems from raw material production to waste management. And you can calculate, for example, carbon footprints. That's probably the most common footprint that we are seeing currently in public. But to do life cycle assessments, considering the long and complex production systems that we have, it's quite time and resource consuming. And there are some initiatives trying to make it easier. But the strength of life cycle assessment is that it ensures that all the relevant environmental impacts are taken into consideration in all those long supply chains. And this is in particularly important in the agri-food sector, because most of the emissions come from the original raw material production or even the fertilizer production behind it. As a standardized method, LCA emerged from the engineering sciences in the 1990s, and that is one of the challenges that we have now in the agri-food sector. It's referring to the plenary keynote speakers of yesterday. It's it's very engineering minded that we can put food production system into a box and assess the resources and emissions coming out of it. But food production systems happen in biological environments, and they are much more difficult to control than a factory. It is still a very developing method, but in fact, so are our food systems. This is just one presentation of a food system. There are several other ones. The idea is only to give how complex these systems are. And also when we are doing life cycle assessments in agri-food systems, it really requires multidisciplinary understanding of agricultural, food, and natural sciences, including biology, chemistry, as well as economics and engineering. And even though we are modeling the environmental impacts here in the left down green, we need to take consideration all those interlinked aspects of the food system when we try to draw our conclusions. So what is the challenge on harmonization in the agri-food sector regarding environmental assessment? Why do we have all those different labels, and why the methods are different? So in the first place, the good scientific practice of LCA studies has been that we define the scope and goal of the study, and after that, we define the methods according to them. Well, this works if we try to improve production chains, that we select the best method applicable to that situation. But that doesn't work for communication if we want to compare a product A to a product B. If they are measured with different methodology, the results can be completely uncomparable. And we really talk about different magnitudes of effects. Do we include certain emissions into the production system, or do we exclude them? So it can give very different results. So in practice, this lack of common framework has led to the use of different methods of food life cycle assessment, and we have produced incomparable results for the society. And cherry picking different methods in the private sector in particularly has led to the use of different methods, and that can produce incomparable, that can really hamper the trust of consumers and the world sustainability transformation. And we do see criticism for LCA for this reason. So harmonization of these used methods is challenging because there is often no scientifically one method to be used, but several methods can be justified. So some harmonization efforts that we have several ones going on at the UN level, at the FAO, I'm sure. Here I present two, I think, most important for the Finnish context. It's the one from the European Commission and then another one from our national project. So at the European level, Commission started Product Environmental Footprint Initiative more than 10 years ago. And European Commission is kind of providing the general harmonization guidelines for how to do a life cycle assessment. But then actually each private sector is responsible for developing and harmonized methodology guidelines for themselves. While European Commission is giving technical support, supervising it, and also the Joint Research Center of the Commission. And there are various multi-actor technical working groups to solve specific issues in the system. And the main idea is really that the sector groups are developing themselves their own guidelines, and Commission is over supervising that they don't conflict too much with each other. That would ensure that the sectors are themselves engaged and feel confident with these guidelines. In Finland, we have LCA Footprint Project. I forgot to put the label of the funder, so Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry here. It follows this European PEF, but we want to develop it further, and we want to give feedback to PEF where we see that the methods are not appropriate. And we want to give Finnish food industry more detailed guidelines on how to do life cycle assessment of Finnish products. We have involved Finnish and Nordic agri-food companies, industry associations, universities, LCA consultancies, ministries, and NGOs, trying to make sure that everybody feels confident with the methods, and so that they would be used afterwards in Finland. So it's a 3-year project, and we will have twice a year workshops where these proposed methodologies and rules are discussed and thought over together. One clear distinction that we want to do in this project is that we focus on the comparable and credible communication that is marked with the box. So we want to be internationally harmonized internationally harmonized and follow the PEF and other standards that are in place. And we give some national additions to that, but we try to be as far as possible aligned with the PEF system. On the other hand, we are, as LCA Science Research Group, we are developing the more detailed methods, because we also do need those very detailed methods to see how our improvement methods do really enhance sustainability. And those are aimed for these development actions. They are not developed for communication purposes, for green claims. And they need to be very detailed, and they have to be science-based. But this is a field that is evolving. The biological models, for example, soil carbon changes, is developing very quickly, and so it's very focused there. But on the other hand, the rules on communication, they now are starting to be more like agreement-based within these multi-actor approaches. So after we as researchers have debated over a decade on or more about certain methodological questions, now the multi-actor approaches try to define the rules to go. So the development of harmonization methods to assess environmental sustainability, it includes verification of the methods used and working together with the stakeholders. Today, we see that the approved sector guidelines created in this multi-actor approach seem mostly scientifically justified. There is mostly because in the first round, not all the sector guidelines that were planned and piloted became official ones. But as the European Commission spokesman told, that proves that the process works. So there was one sector that came up with rules that were not accepted by other parties, and that's why they didn't get the final official version. And further, of course, currently various research organizations, NGOs, and also other sector associations are leading this kind of multi-actor, multidisciplinary groups to improve LCA methods for different purposes like soil carbon or biodiversity. And there's certainly a need for communication purposes and for improved measures to have this kind of more detailed models. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannele. So we're going to do the Q&A later in the after the end of the presentation. But it's very interesting and very presentation about how to reconcile the global challenges to the local environment, how to harmonize these assessment. So the next presentation would be by Tia Kollari from University of Helsinki about stakeholders' view on agrobiodiversity. Right, so let me share the screen again. Oh, hi.
My name is Silvia. I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Helsinki, Ruralia Institute. So I'm going to talk about my literature review that is about stakeholders' perspectives on agrobiodiversity. And first, I'm just going to go through a few main concepts and then explain how I've been doing this review. So as we all know, we are losing biodiversity, and there are 5 big drivers, and also agriculture is one contributor to biodiversity loss through land use change and pollution, for example. And biodiversity and agriculture, they are closely connected, and therefore it's important to study the agrobiodiversity, which is broadly described as domesticated plants, animals, organisms, and wild species genetics that can be found on agricultural landscape. They can also be divided into this plant agrobiodiversity, meaning the crops and livestock, and then the associated agrobiodiversity, meaning the non-productive part. Agrobiodiversity, it is studied in this biomonitor for CAP research project that I'm working in. It aims to enhance the monitoring of agrobiodiversity on farm through developing different technologies and also including stakeholder cooperation. And stakeholders are important players as their perspectives can influence how biodiversity conservation is planned on farm and how the policies. So that's my topic, and I'm going to discuss it more. In this review, I'm going to reflect on the transition studies as individual perspectives they play on the micro level on this transition. So my aim is to identify the variety of these different perspectives and the scope and the level of knowledge that different stakeholders have. And therefore, I'm going to focus on studies that consider the agrobiodiversity, like the broad term, and then limit focus on the associated agrobiodiversity, the soil, fauna, and herbivores, carnivores, and such. So my questions are that how stakeholders perceive agrobiodiversity and what kind of perspectives these studied stakeholders attach to this associated agrobiodiversity on farm level. So my plan is I'm doing a scoping review, and I've been looking for papers that cover the variety. I'm using the agrobiodiversity terms and all these different type of perspectives from different cognitive levels, and also including different stakeholders. This sentence is missing a few, so I need to do another search for those. But hopefully I get the whole scope of all stakeholders. So I have selected peer-reviewed and English articles from 1990 to 2023. I'm using 4 databases. So I'm following the PRISMA protocol to go through the literature. So I first started removing the duplicates and then went to identifying the titles and abstracts, and then I screened the abstracts, and now I have 76 articles to read fully, and I've almost done that, but as I haven't excluded articles yet, I don't have the final amount for the further analysis, and I'm taking some additional articles from the reference list, and they are not included in these numbers since I'm still reading them. So my plan is to do a qualitative content analysis and do a data-driven categorization, and the possible categories are likely these perceptions, knowledge, values, and attitudes, and I'm sure that more categories will arise. So now my preliminary results. So now I can say that farmers are the most studied stakeholder group, and wildlife, crops, trees, and plants are the most studied branch of agrobiodiversity. And this has been conducted on, for example, genetic diversity, but there is some. And how stakeholders perceive agrobiodiversity is very vary. Some have very narrow perspective on agrobiodiversity. It can mean viewing it as the diversity of species, diversity of crops, and some view agrobiodiversity as the whole rural ecosystem. So the scope is quite wide. Also, the importance of agrobiodiversity has been identified by stakeholders, and the importance for farming and human especially. And some stakeholders, mostly farmers, they identify this beneficial and harmful biodiversity, meaning that, for example, birds, they can be viewed beneficial if they are seen to control pests naturally, or harmful if they damage crops. And also the causes of biodiversity loss are acknowledged, and agriculture has been identified as one of the causes. Values, I have listed all kinds of values here from those 76 articles. And from them, I can say, for example, that intrinsic values are defined to be by few studies that they are the most important values that they are that affect further the conservation behavior. Aesthetic values, they are often connected with landscape element, and plants and livestock, they are usually discussed with economic values. Attitudes, they are mostly related to biodiversity conservation and management measures, but there are some attitudes toward biodiversity in form of this division between positive and negative, and I think they are connected with the perceptions and experiences. If farmers have experienced crop damage, then they have negative attitudes and knowledge. So stakeholders, they tend to have different levels of knowledge based on these articles. Some lack proper understanding of the concept of agrobiodiversity, and some are somewhat aware and some have more knowledge. Also, the type of knowledge that stakeholders have differs. For example, some have more knowledge of mammals, and then they tend to have less knowledge of insects. And when plants are discussed, they are plant knowledge. It's usually related to the usability of human purposes. I'm already concluding, but so to sum up, the farmers, wildlife, and plant biodiversity, they are the most studied, and there is a whole variety of different perspectives. And also the perspectives of genetic and landscape diversity, and perspectives of companies and citizens, for example, they are less studied, and there should be more research on those. So I would say that it's important to study these perceptions and the levels of knowledge, as they can be used to further to design future biodiversity policies and can be used to create targeted education programs, for example, for farmers. And for example, if farmers are more familiar with certain species, they recognize them or are comfortable to monitor them, that's valuable knowledge. And if it's know what they don't know of species, then this can be used in education. So I was quite fast, but thank you. I have few references here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very nice, literature review and synthesis, because it's really important now to know about all of these. How do the stakeholders matters in all of these sustainability transformation, and how they could play a different role according to their. Sorry, what was it? Yeah. Yeah, according to the perception. So the next presentation would be from Vilma Sandstrom from Aalto University. It's about dependency on imported agricultural input, global trends from the recent past. So now the floor is yours.
Okay, do you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so as you said, my name is Vilma Sandström. I'm a postdoctoral researcher from the Water and Development Research Group, Aalto University. Oh, yes. Okay. Browser. So yes, so I'm happy to continue discussion on sustainable food systems and presenting our study about agricultural inputs and trade. So we know agricultural inputs are used heavily in food production. Inputs such as fertilizers, pesticides, feeds, energy, machinery, and many of these are highly traded commodities in global markets. When there are then disturbances in global trade, such as the war in Ukraine or the recently witnessed COVID-19 pandemic, it can threaten the local food production when the imports of these key inputs are then reduced. And in a recent simulation study that was conducted in our research group, it was found that if the inputs of fertilizers, pesticides, and machineries were to decrease by 50%, the global maize production would decrease 25% and wheat production by 21%. So many, especially these high yielding areas of Europe and North America, are heavily dependent on these inputs. And if their availability is reduced, it will have huge impacts on food production. But then studies quantifying these temporal trends of agricultural input trade, focusing not just the economic aspects, but the physical trade flows, and looking at multiple inputs at the same time at the global level, they are missing. So with this study, we want to fill this knowledge gap and look at these two research questions. So we want to see which countries, areas have become most dependent on imported inputs and most at risk if there's some disturbances in these trade flows. And then also we want to see, have there been significant changes during the last decades, or has the situation been the same for a long time already? And we approached these questions by looking data for the past 30 years, from the 1990 to 2020. We have data from 189 countries. We look at synthetic fertilizers, their use and trade. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We also look at pesticides, their use and trade, imports, exports. We used an aggregate of multiple herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. And also we look at feeds. So we look at 70 most important feed crops that covering more than 80% of the global feed use in 2020. And the data we use mainly from FAO country level statistics and also from some trade flow models. And here we can see what do the results look like. Well, this is just the global level sums to see we have there the 5 different inputs we are looking for, and then we have the situation in the beginning of the time period and then in the end of the time period. And the yellow part is the part used for coming from the imports, and then the purple one is the coming from domestic production. So for all of these inputs, we see that the yellow parts have increased in these 30 years. So countries are importing more than previously. Especially we see that potassium fertilizers, pesticides are heavily imported. Feed crops, we still see that most of them are still coming from domestic production, so that's not that much import dependent. But then there are some interesting things like pesticides in the latter part. It looks like everything comes from imports. Of course, this is not the case. So it can be errors how countries report their use and trade and data, or then it can be that, I don't know, maybe those years countries were importing more and storing them, not using all. We still have to look. These are just preliminary results still. But we are not that interested in the global level, but I mean the global level sums, but we are more interested in countries, in the different countries, in the areas. So to see where are the most, where the countries who have become most dependent on these imports. And here, just a big picture, we see there in the column most left side, we see the situation in the beginning of the time period. Then in the middle, we see the situation in the end of the time period, 2018, 2020, and in the last column, we see the trend. And here only the countries with significant change in the trend is shown there. And the countries that are colored in blue are the net exporter countries, and the colors in more red are the net importing countries. So here, the countries that are mostly like more red are the most dependent on the imports. So let's look a little bit closer. First, the fertilizers. We have here the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizer imports and exports, and here is what is shown is the net trade divided by the use. So how much of the use comes from imports or then exports? And there are many different interesting things we can see from these maps, but maybe I just highlight some of them. Well, we see that if we look at the latter part of the time period, Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is really highly red. So they are very much importing all of the fertilizers. We see also that South America is heavily importing fertilizers to their production. Then if we look at pesticides and feed crops also, well, pesticides, it's particularly evident that the production has been more and more concentrated in certain countries. we see that in the latter part of the time period, most countries are red, so almost everybody are importing, and then there are just a few countries, mainly India, China, USA, that are then producing and exporting actually these pesticides. And then with feed crops, as we saw already from the global sum picture, we see that they are more consumed from the domestic production, so they are not that much imported. But then we also wanted to see these together, so try to make some country clusters to see which countries are behaving similarly, and to see maybe which countries are the most at risk. So here we see the cluster A, the purple ones, the first row. We see that those are the countries that are importing all of those inputs. So many countries in Africa, in South Asia also. So those countries, we can imagine if there's disturbances in trade, they may be the most one at risk. But then there is for example, cluster B. We see that big countries that are exporters of feed. So we see that those are countries that import the other inputs, but then they are exporters of feed. So there's countries like Brazil, Argentina there. So if then there will be disturbances in there, if they can't get the inputs to their feed production, for example, then we can imagine that will then cascade to other areas, the impacts. But then interestingly, there's in the cluster E, there's only 7 countries in that one that are countries that are exporting like all of these inputs. But yes, food self-sufficiency ratio, it does not tell the whole story about import dependency. So we have to also look at the import dependency of these inputs to the agriculture. We saw that most countries have increased their dependency on imported inputs, but then there are possibilities to reduce risks in multiple levels, in institutional level, having strong reserve stocks, private sector level, maintaining diversity in trade partners, also technological solutions, alternative ways of replacing reduced imports through nutrient recycling, alternative feed sources, and others. But just as a last point, kind of concluding, when assessing resilience towards trade-related shocks, it's essential to understand the agricultural input dependencies within global food system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our last presenter is online. Titta Tapiola, how to advance bio-innovators from the perspective of a public research institution. So please.
Yes, hello. I seem to have a problem with my camera, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but please share the slides if you have. We have it.
Yes,
we have. Yeah.
Access in your browser address bar. I don't know why is this. I just had a. Okay, let me see if this helps.
We have your slides here as well. If that
Oh
helps.
yes, I'm just trying to get the camera,
okay,
but okay, it doesn't matter. No, okay, now you can see me. I don't know if it's actually relevant. I share my screen. Just a second. Can you? Okay. Can you hear and see me?
Yeah, but can you put the slides in the full screen mode if possible?
I have. I guess it takes some time before it goes to that. Is it now? Because I see it in full screen.
I think that's probably okay. Yeah.
Okay. Because I have it full. Yeah. All right. I guess I can start. Or do I have to make some other changes? So my name is Titta Tapiola, and together with Jarkko Leppälä, we are both from Natural Resources Institute Finland, in short Luke. And we had a small internal project to advance our innovation process. And based on that, I have this small presentation, how to advance bio innovations. And of course, it's from Luke's perspective, which is a public research institution. So objectives and needs of such a research institution is, of course, in connection to the whole society and bioeconomy, especially because Luke is concentrating in natural resources. The bioeconomy is very, very close to our interests. So in general, improving the impact of research is important. And part of that it is identifying the new sustainable bio-based products from the research and ideas and stakeholder needs in general to enable new sustainable bioeconomy solutions. The part of this project and in general, of course, the comprehensive risk assessment is one way to address the challenges of new product development and later on the business development. So in this work, we combined the product development and risk management tools to develop a model or tool for product development to enable sustainable bioeconomy. And what we did is the first went through some product cases. There were many different kind of cases, looked at some literature to product development and risk management literature. We had interviews, one workshop, and during the analysis, we concentrated in two interviews, which were concerning a product called Suberin. And then in the end, we had an early model for the researchers to help their product development. So what is an innovative product? This is from a flow chart from describing the new product development. So it starts from new ideas all the way to decision to go forward with the new product candidates. And of course, there is also risk assessment involved naturally in this process in general. And of course, what is the innovation in how is it defined? Innovation is defined to create value. It can harness new technology or invention, and in general, it contributes competitive advantage, which can be many different things, and economic growth.
Sorry, Titta, the
Yes?
text is very small in your slide because we cannot see the full screen slide.
And you don't need to actually see, but I wonder because I I changed it here for full screen, but I wonder why is it not showing to you? Is it now? Maybe I do it from here.
Yeah.
Any better?
No, it's the same.
It's maybe because I have, okay, let's do it this way.
Me sinne diaesitys välilehelle. Eikö se ole siellä? Ja tästä poista toi täppä tuosta näytä esittäjä näkymä.
Now,
Ja sit kokeile.
okay, that's strange. Oh, I'm sorry. And now I can try it. Is it now?
Excellent. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Anyhow, so to go to the actual tool development, which is at the moment targeted to researchers. Let's go to that one. So we developed the questionnaire or questions, which were quite plenty, 27. This is the phase one, to deal with the product itself, its production, value chain, and stakeholders, expectations related to that certain product. And then we had questions to about the risk, regulation, and safety of production and product itself. And then questions about the business potential and the markets related to that certain product. And then also questions about next steps, what the researchers may have already thought about, and the financial opportunities or projects on the line, either internal or external ones. The analysis of the interview, and this is now case Superine. The questions were grouped into background information about the product or end product, and business evaluation and risk assessment. So at this stage, it was clear that the researchers didn't really always think about that they have this product, in this case Superine, which is not actually yet end product. It can be used it can be used in many ways to produce different kind of end products. And this was not always clear when discussing, or there was not clear definition if we were talking about customers, that was it the end customer or customer of the Superine. So that was one clear indication that the value chain was not totally clear all the time. And there was not clear indication that always the stakeholder roles, needs, or expectations were systematically determined for the certain end product or even the product. And the knowledge of scaling up and scaling of technologies was a little bit lacking. And also the comprehensive utilization of raw material was not always thought about, because that's quite important if thinking about circular bioeconomy or the business model, that it would be beneficial to have all the raw materials used. And also, what is the Luke's role in that whole process was not clear at all times. And the risk assessment also was quite difficult, naturally, because especially from the end product, for the end product, it was difficult. And then we had this workshop where we had less questions. We defined the only 10, grouped and analyzed the interviews, and then we grouped these questions in 10 concise questions, and we had the workshop, and where we had worksheets where researchers filled up their answers regarding their specific products. And there were different kind of products. So this was not only for Superin. And the conclusion for that workshop is that, again, this we have to clarify the wordings and vocabulary for product versus the end product or application. It was quite confusing. And also there should be one product and one application at a time when we are analyzing, that there is no several end products or applications discussed simultaneously, because it gets quite difficult. And systematic analysis of options is needed, so that if we are looking for partners for end product to take this product further in the market, of course we should think about which are the good end product options, and that way to have a systematic analysis of the options. And also innovation potential should be thought about and maybe analyzed also, so that the most innovative and having best potential would be the one who we are proceeding with. And also the stages of innovation process should be some way cleared inside the Luke, and also when we are discussing about these products, so that we understand at which stage this potential innovation or product is at the moment, so that we can better look for funding and also potential partners. In addition, this production and raw material volumes needed some clarification, how much we have raw materials available for this product to be produced, and also the value chain was not always so clear, how to build it up, what is needed there. Also patents should be checked before we proceed with anything. And also these later questions in a questionnaire, vulnerability, and this legislation, regulations, and risk mapping were quite difficult, understandably, for researchers. So as a conclusion, these are some questions we should proceed with a business when we have a business partner for this potential innovation, and this could be actually also very beneficial for the business partner together to analyze these questions and also share these risks and determine which risk is whose responsibility. So in the end, after these interviews and workshop, this kind of picture came, or we draw this picture, so that we have this product or invention coming from the research, and there are maybe even several end products coming out of it. So we should analyze these options, which end product would be the best to proceed. And after this analysis, to go after the analysis, go and think about the next steps. And this is iterative, because we might have first one end product, and we conclude that, okay, this is not a good market or good end product option, so let's think about another one. And this should involve internal experts and also end users and other external experts to get a very coherent and a good picture of these markets and opportunities for that certain end product. So as a conclusion, so in general, these questions seem to be partly very difficult. The beginning part of the questionnaire was easy when it's dealing with a product and its qualities and lab scale production, that kind of things. But when we go further in the value chain or the product or the commercialization, it seems to be quite difficult. So it would be good to have an internal multidisciplinary group having different kind of expertise to think about these questions, management, business, technology, market, IPR, etc. Of course, the challenge is to have time and and resources for this kind of thing. But we have discussed about this, and we have actually IPR team existing, so there is potential for this kind of activities. And the end part of the questionnaire with having this risk and business discussions could be done with a potential business partner or existing business partner to have a kind of innovation workshops where we can do this risk assessment and management part of the questionnaire. And in general, involvement of stakeholders and end users earlier on would be very beneficial for this innovation process to be more market friendly and user friendly. And of course, probably there has been, but because we just took a product and we didn't really much analyze what has been done before. But in general, of course, it's easier to have a innovation when it's already sort of gone through end user and market acceptance at some level.
Can you, Titta, give your last sentence? We are out of time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, extension of the tool. Now we are going to have it for later for the better serve the next steps of the innovation process to have it with business partners. Thank you. Sorry for technical problems.
So thank you, Titta. And so we have now the question and answer session. So questions from the floor here as well as from the chat. So we could first take questions from the floor, please.
Thank you. I have a question for Vilma. Very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. And it's very eye-opening that you show us how vulnerable actually our food system because of the dependency on the input, agricultural inputs. But what about the other argument that says that actually the import and in the trade is actually like helping those countries to become less vulnerable. Maybe they couldn't produce food before, and then now because they have this trade and import, and then they could produce, and it's, I mean, because it's a trade-off, right? And then it's always difficult when we write papers and then like write these policy recommendations, like should we enforce more trade or should we, I don't know, enforce more like self-productions and stuff like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Is on? Yes. Very important comment. Thank you, Daniel. Yes. My idea is not to present that we should not be like importing anything. Like I think being resilient in the food system, it's having like this both like mixed. We need importing thing like inputs, but we also need to be prepared if there will be then like if the availability of those imports are not there. So I think yes, very good, very important point that we are not like the aim is not to just go one direction or the other, but I think we need to be somewhere there in the middle. We need both trade, we need both domestic production and preparedness for trade disturbances.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, please?
Hi, thanks. Is this on? Yeah. Thanks for the insightful presentations. I'm Jelena Salmi from the University of Oulu, and I have a question for Hannele Heltola. In one of the slides, you mentioned specific characteristics of Finnish conditions as a challenge for harmonization. So could you talk a little bit more about what those specific Finnish conditions are? And how do you balance between the need for method harmonization and the need to consider local specificity in the LCA food project?
Yes, I try to remember to answer both. So the challenge is that in Finland, we can create models for Finnish production. We can create, for example, eutrophying models for peat soils. And if we want to improve production systems that are on the peat soils, we can use that model and gain good insights what we should do. But if we want to compare production at the peat soils and mineral soils, and we have another model for mineral soils, and they are not comparable with each other, whether that's a mineral soil in Finland or in Canada or Europe, that doesn't matter. The challenge is that we have these very specific models, typically for different climate circumstances, soil circumstances, and they are not comparable with each other. So they can be used for improvement measures, but it's more difficult to use those for communication. And we are balancing all the time, making these guidelines that, okay, we would like to take certain Finnish conditions into account, but if we will have on the market products from Sweden and from Finland, and they should have a climate label, the methods behind should be similar. And usually they are on a more upper level in greenhouse gas emissions. We talk about IPC tire levels, and it has to be just a more rough model that can be applied in different geographical areas. Do I answer both your questions?
Yeah, thank you. And more questions, please. Yes.
Hello, I'm Hanna Tuomisto from the University of Helsinki and Natural Resources Institute Finland, LUKE. And I have a question to Tia. So yeah, it was actually really interesting, this your presentation, because it also relates to yesterday's biodiversity session. I guess you also participated that one, where there was one study that they had interviewed different stakeholders about their biodiversity perspectives or perceptions. And so now you have been reviewing many studies. So because yesterday I was wondering that it would be quite interesting to know more into the details, like what kind of characteristics of farmers or different other stakeholders, like retailers, like are there some common characteristics in those different groups that link with or correlate with their interest to do something for the biodiversity, like for example for farmers, like are organic farmers more interested in biodiversity issues and more aware of them, and then for the rest of the chain, like thinking about retailers or food processors, manufacturers, are there like anything like are bigger companies more interested or small ones, or are there anything like that?
Yes, thank you. I hope this works. So yes, there are few studies that I remember comparing conventional farmers and organic farmers, and there is different how they view agri-biodiversity, and organic farmers view it more important and are more acknowledgeable about it than conventional farmers. I haven't found any articles, for example, relating to retailers, but there are a few studies conducted with citizens and consumers, and they are more like general views on agri-biodiversity, as I remember, and farmers then they go maybe more deeper into the different areas of biodiversity, like how genetics and so it's really wide. wide. I hope I answered.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more minutes. So another brief question. Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful presentations. My name is Kamuti from Zambia, University of Zambia. And my question is for, I think, Nere. Yeah, on the harmonization aspect of the agri-food systems. Yeah, looking at the kind of complex food for various sectors or products. My interest is on what are some of the criteria or the parameters that you are going to look at that kind of bring together these different aspects of the agri-food system in your harmonization process?
Sorry, I didn't understand. What was the question?
Oh, okay. My understanding is that the agri-food system has multi components, and so they are different. For example, you have maybe crop production, animal production, and so on. So there are different inputs there. There are systems that are involved. So looking at those different variabilities, in your work, you are trying to have a common ground. So what are some of the things that can bring them together to have a systematic harmonization? What are the parameters that can bring these things together?
Yeah, there is a huge amount of data you need to collect from the whole chain, but they are in the agri-food system. Actually, the PEF system is only trying to harmonize assessments within a product category. And a product category can be, for example, dairy products, or it can be only bottled water. They can be very specific. So in that sense, they have it easier, not trying to harmonize everything. What we see is that now we have different labels and different kind of communication on different food products, and that is something we would harmonize it a bit also between the product categories. And it is challenging, and we cannot go into every single detail of all production systems. We cannot define rules for mushroom production from a forest or cultivated or very, very specific, but we try to cover like the most general food products, animal products and plant products, and their kind of typical production chains. But of course, there remains variability in the food system, and we cannot cover every situation.
Thank you. So I think we are running out of time now. So I think that we have had a really nice and interesting session on the impacts of research on agri-food sector in general, on the different assessment methods and other being developed currently. So I would like to thank all the presenters, all the questions, and the discussants on this session. So a big hand to everyone. Thank you.